I was just hired to watch the water, but it was her eyes I couldn't look away from. She said she felt safer when I was close, and somehow, I did too. I wasn't sure what to expect when I took the job. The listing had been brief: private estate needs seasonal lifeguard. It sounded like an easy way to save for school, maybe catch some sun. I didn't realize that the quietest place I'd ever worked would also be the most unforgettable. The gate opened with a soft buzz, revealing a long stone path lined with cypress trees and the shimmer of water beyond. The house sat above it like something from another time, graceful, sun-warmed, quiet. Then she appeared. She walked out from the terrace in a white cover-up, a wide straw hat shading her face. Even from a distance, I could tell she carried herself with an ease that made everything around her seem calmer. When she reached me, she smiled, not the kind of smile meant to impress, but one that felt genuine. "You must be the new lifeguard," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, with that kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. "Yes, ma'am," I replied before catching myself. "I mean, yes." She laughed softly, a small, disarming sound. "Ma'am makes me feel ancient. Just call me Claire." The name suited her, elegant, simple, unforced. She led me to the pool area, explaining where things were: the first aid kit, the shaded cabana, the cooler stocked with bottled water. I listened, maybe too intently, not because I needed the information, but because her voice had a rhythm I didn't want to interrupt. The pool itself was a mirror of the sky, clear and still. The faint scent of jasmine drifted from the garden. Sunlight danced across the surface, painting ripples of gold against the pale stone. I remember thinking how peaceful it all was, almost too peaceful for a job that required vigilance. She must have noticed my quietness because she paused beside me and asked, "Have you done this before?" "Yeah," I said, "but never in a place like this." Her gaze followed mine to the water. "It's always been my sanctuary," she said softly. "I suppose you'll be sharing it now." For a moment, the words hung there, simple, but heavy with something unspoken. She handed me a clipboard with emergency numbers and schedules, her fingers brushing mine in the exchange. Her touch was light, warm from the sun, but steady. It lingered in my mind long after she turned away. When she walked back toward the house, I caught the faint sway of her hair against her shoulders, the quiet confidence of someone used to solitude but not untouched by it. As I sat by the pool that afternoon, watching the water shimmer in the fading light, I realized something strange. I wasn't just guarding her pool. I was watching over a piece of her world, a space that felt private, almost sacred. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I already wanted to protect it. Days found their rhythm. Mornings began with sunlight spilling across the tiles and the steady hum of cicadas. The pool would glisten like a sheet of glass until she appeared, usually around noon, always composed, always a little different. Claire swam with quiet precision, each stroke unhurried, as if she were in conversation with the water. I'd sit at my post beneath the shade, pretending to read or check equipment, but really, I was just learning the patterns of her presence, the way her fingers cut through the surface, the faint lines of focus between her brows, the way she'd pause mid-lap to rest at the edge and tilt her face toward the sun. Sometimes she'd glance my way, catching me mid-thought. She never teased or questioned it, just offered that knowing half-smile before continuing her swim. It wasn't long before we began to talk. At first, it was light, questions about the weather, how long I'd been working summers like this. She had a way of asking that made me want to keep answering. Over the days, her stories began to stretch longer, small details about her travels, her love of old books, the garden she was trying to keep alive. I learned that her husband had passed a few years ago, and that the pool had been his favorite part of the house. She spoke of it with calm acceptance, but her eyes softened when she mentioned him, a kind of respect that made me admire her more. She didn't seem lonely exactly, just untethered. Like she had built a calm life, but sometimes forgot how to fill the quiet within it. One afternoon, she brought out 2 glasses of iced tea, condensation running down the sides. You've been in the sun too long, she said, handing one to me. When our fingers brushed, a small shiver of awareness passed between us, nothing obvious, just that subtle warmth that lingers a moment too long. She didn't pull away right away, and neither did I. The air smelled of citrus and sunscreen. A soft breeze carried the sound of wind chimes from the porch. She sat near me beneath the cabana, her wet hair trailing against her shoulders. "You're quiet," she said. "Most people your age can't sit still this long." I smiled. Maybe I just like being where it's calm. Her eyes met mine, clear, steady, thoughtful. "Then I suppose you're in the right place." For a while, neither of us said anything. The world felt paused, just the sound of the pool filter humming and the faint rustle of palm leaves. That afternoon ended like every other. She disappeared inside with a towel draped around her shoulders, and I finished my shift as the sky turned amber. But something had changed. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It held weight, soft, invisible, and growing stronger with each passing day. The rain came without warning. One moment the sky was a pale blue haze, the next it had darkened into a restless gray. I was just gathering the towels when the first drops hit, light at first, then a sudden curtain of water. "Come inside," Claire called from the terrace. Her voice, sharp against the rain, carried a warmth that pulled me toward her. By the time I stepped through the glass doors, I was already soaked. She laughed, a quiet, surprised laugh that softened her whole face. "You look like you just swam in the pool fully clothed." "Guess I take my job too seriously," I said, pushing my hair back, trying not to notice how her laughter filled the wide, echoing space of the living room. She handed me a towel, soft, faintly scented with lavender, and gestured toward the wide window that overlooked the pool. The world outside blurred beneath the rain, the water rippled, alive with tiny silver circles. "Funny," she said, leaning against the window frame, "how even storms can make things beautiful." I glanced at her profile, the way her damp hair clung gently against her neck, the quiet strength in her posture. "Maybe it's the contrast," I said. "You can't appreciate still water without a little chaos." She smiled at that, her eyes drifting toward me, lingering longer than usual. "You sound older than you look." "People tell me that," I said. "I just listen a lot." Her gaze softened. "That's rare." For a moment, the only sound was the steady rhythm of rain against glass. The air between us carried that faint tension of two people realizing they'd crossed some invisible line, not through touch or words, but through understanding. She moved to the couch, wrapping the towel loosely around her shoulders. "It's strange," she murmured, "how quiet this house feels when it rains. It's supposed to be peaceful, but sometimes it just reminds me I'm alone here." I hesitated, then sat across from her. "You don't seem like someone who's easily lonely." "I'm not," she said softly, eyes lowering. "But loneliness doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it's just silence that nobody else hears." Her honesty caught me off guard, simple, real, unguarded. I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt too heavy. Instead, I reached out, barely brushing her wrist. She looked up. The moment held, brief, quiet, full of something we both understood but didn't name. The rain began to slow, its rhythm softening into a steady drizzle. She exhaled, a small smile finding its way back to her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "not for anything specific, just for being there." When I left later that day, the scent of lavender and rain clung to me. And for the first time, the job didn't feel like work. It felt like a promise, one I didn't yet understand but couldn't walk away from. A week passed before I saw her again. She had gone on a short trip, something about visiting a friend up north. I told myself I didn't notice the days stretching longer without her voice breaking the stillness of the pool, but the lie wore thin by the third sunset. When she finally returned, I heard her before I saw her, the low hum of her car pulling into the driveway, the click of heels on stone. I stood, trying not to look too eager. Welcome back, I said, setting down the pool net. She smiled, but something in it was different, smaller, more restrained. Thank you. Everything looks beautiful, as always. Her voice was polite, but distant. She walked toward the edge of the pool and dipped her fingers in, the surface trembling under her touch. I missed this, she murmured, almost to herself. I wanted to tell her I missed her too, not just her presence, but the easy way she filled the silence. Instead, I asked if she wanted me to adjust the heater. Anything to keep from saying what I really felt. She shook her head. No, it's fine. Then, after a pause, I've been thinking. Those words carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I've realized, she continued carefully, that maybe I've been too comfortable. You've been wonderful, truly, but I worry that people might see it differently. I nodded slowly, understanding before she finished. She drew in a breath. You're young. And she stopped herself, eyes flicking toward the pool as if the water might give her courage. It's not fair to you if this looks like something it shouldn't. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint whir of the filter and the wind pressing softly against the curtains. I stepped closer, close enough to see the uncertainty in her expression, a rare crack in her composure. I don't want to make things harder for you, I said quietly. Her eyes lifted to mine. You make things easier, she whispered. Then her voice softened further, almost lost to the breeze. That's the problem. Neither of us moved. The air between us held that delicate ache, the pull between what feels right and what's allowed. Finally, she turned, her tone gentle but firm. Let's keep some space. Just a little. I nodded again, though it felt like swallowing something heavy. When she walked back toward the house, I watched her go, the measured calm of her steps, the faint tremor in her hand as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The pool was silent again, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt like holding my breath underwater, suspended between what I wanted and what I couldn't reach. For a few days after that conversation, the air around the pool felt different, thinner somehow, as if even the breeze knew to keep quiet. She still swam, still smiled politely, but something essential had changed. The laughter that once came so easily between us now stayed locked behind a polite distance. I told myself it was fine. That space was probably what we both needed. But the truth was, the silence had begun to ache. One evening, I stayed later than usual, closing up after she'd already gone inside. The sun had slipped low, staining the water gold. I was wiping down the deck chairs when the back door opened again. Still working, her voice called softly. I turned. Claire stood there with 2 mugs of tea in her hands, steam curling into the cool night air. She'd changed into a loose sweater, her hair tied up, her face calm but unreadable. I thought you might want something warm before you go, she said. I hesitated before taking the mug. Thanks. We sat side by side on the edge of the pool, our reflections trembling in the water beneath us. The sky had turned a deep indigo, the first stars beginning to show. I've been thinking, she said finally. About what I said the other day. I glanced at her. She didn't look away. You were just being careful, I replied. Maybe, she said, her voice quieter now. But maybe I was also afraid. Of what? She took a long breath. Of needing someone again. Of enjoying someone's company too much. It's easier to stay guarded than to wonder if it's all just temporary. I didn't know what to say at first. So I just listened, the way she once told me was rare. After a long pause, she smiled faintly. You remind me that not everyone leaves. That maybe, safety isn't about being alone. The words hung between us, carried by the sound of gentle ripples. Then she turned slightly, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was so light it might have been accidental, but it didn't feel that way. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I feel safer when you're close. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't even confession. It was something deeper: gratitude, trust, the quiet surrender of someone who'd stopped running from her own heart. I looked at her, the pool lights casting soft silver patterns across her skin, and realized that I felt it too, that same strange sense of safety, fragile yet absolute. For a long time, we just sat there, two people caught between stillness and something quietly forming. The night hummed around us, crickets in the garden, distant thunder, the soft clink of her bracelet as she moved her hand just a little closer to mine. We didn't speak again after that. We didn't have to. The evenings began to cool as the end of summer drew closer. The air held that faint scent of change, a mix of dry leaves and something almost bittersweet. Claire had decided it was time to close the pool for the season, though she insisted on one final swim. It was late afternoon when I arrived, the light soft and golden, stretching long across the water. She was already there, sitting on the edge in a slate blue swimsuit, her feet skimming the surface. She looked up as I approached, a calm smile touching her lips. "Last day," she said quietly. "I thought you should be here for it." I nodded, setting down my things, suddenly aware of how familiar this place had become, the sound of water lapping at the tiles, the faint rustle of the trees beyond the fence, even the echo of her voice drifting across the patio. She slipped into the pool, the water folding around her in soft ripples. Each stroke was deliberate, graceful, as though she were trying to memorize the feeling of it. I watched from my usual spot, the weight in my chest both peaceful and heavy at once. When she surfaced near me, droplets clung to her eyelashes, her breathing slow. She brushed her hair back, the motion simple, human, quietly beautiful. "Feels colder this time," she said, resting her arms on the edge near my feet. "Maybe because you know it's ending," I replied. Her eyes met mine, a gaze that seemed to hold both warmth and ache. "Maybe." She stayed there for a moment longer, half in the water, half leaning toward me. I offered the towel she'd left on the chair. When she reached up to take it, her hand slipped, and instinctively, I caught her wrist. Her skin was cool from the pool, her pulse quick beneath my fingers. Neither of us moved right away. The world seemed to hush, no cicadas, no breeze, just the sound of water between us. Then, quietly, she stepped closer. Her other hand came to rest lightly against my chest, her palm trembling just slightly. I could feel the chill of her skin through the fabric of my shirt, and beneath it, the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For watching over me. For everything." There was no need for more. The moment said enough, the months of quiet glances, shared words, unspoken things finally settling into stillness. I reached up and brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Her eyes fluttered closed for a breath, and in that silence, something passed between us, a promise that neither of us needed to speak. When she finally turned to leave the pool, she paused at the steps, looking back once more. "Stay a little longer?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Always." And for the first time, the space between us didn't feel like distance anymore. The last day of the season came quietly. The sky was a pale, cloudless blue, that kind of late summer calm that feels both endless and fleeting. I arrived early, more out of habit than duty, though there wasn't much left to guard. The pool was still, the chairs stacked, the water catching the faint shimmer of morning light. Claire came out a little later, a light sweater draped over her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me, but it was that gentle kind of smile that carries more feeling than words ever could. "So," she said softly, "our season's over." I nodded. "Yeah." It went fast. She looked around, as if memorizing everything, the trees, the tiles, even the sound of the wind through the hedges. "Funny," she murmured. "It's just a pool. But somehow it feels like more than that now." "It is," I said quietly. "At least, it was for me." She turned toward me, her expression thoughtful, the kind of look that could hold you still if you let it. "You've been a kind presence here," she said. More than you realize. The way she said it, calm, sincere, almost tender, made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell her what she'd meant to me too. How this summer had changed something inside me, how her voice, her calm, her quiet strength had left a mark I couldn't name. But all that came out was, "You made this place feel alive." Her eyes softened, glimmering in the sunlight. "That's kind of you." There was a long pause. Then, without ceremony, she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a hesitant hug, nor a desperate one, just steady, real. Her cheek rested lightly against my chest, her breath warmed through my shirt. For a moment, everything felt perfectly still, the faint chirp of crickets, the smell of salt and sun lotion, the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders. When she finally pulled back, her hand lingered at the back of my neck, thumb tracing an absent pattern there. "You'll visit?" she asked, half smiling. "If you'll have me." "You'll always have a place here," she said, and the words carried the quiet weight of something permanent, even if the season wasn't. I gathered my things slowly, not wanting to break the moment. As I started toward the gate, I looked back one last time. She was still standing there by the water, sunlight catching her hair, her reflection trembling faintly across the pool's surface. She raised a hand in a small wave, and I returned it. As I stepped out into the late afternoon light, the air smelled faintly of jasmine and chlorine, and I realized that some summers don't really end, they just live on quietly, somewhere inside you.